Let glory shine. From the ashes I rise. Every scar a story, every tear baptized. This is my freedom. This is my climb. Let glory shine. It's the power inside.
Welcome back to Let Glory Shine. I am your host, Martha Glory, and thank you for coming back for another episode. We are continuing from last week's episode with Peter Young because I was not ready to wrap up the interview. There's just too much to talk about, too much to explore, and so I really wanted to continue that. So, welcome back, Peter Young.
Thank you very much, Martha, for having me back on.
Absolutely. So let's jump in where we left off last week. And we were talking about once you got out, once you realized
Mhm.
you had been in a cult, and now you've written this letter to Uncle Robert. And I'm going to let you take it from there.
Sure. So, I can kind of condense if you didn't hear last week. I was married with 5 kids. I was married about 20 years. I unwittingly married into this cult. My wife was born into it. So then when she left me to draw closer to, Uncle Robert, it's interesting because, you think about what married people do is, you exchange rings, you go on a honeymoon, and you try to have kids together. Well, about 17, 18 years into our marriage, um, she had expressed a desire to be a surrogate and provide Uncle Robert with a male grandson. And thankfully, that didn't happen. But it shows you the depth of the brainwashing she was under. And then I lost my wedding band about 4 or 5 years into our marriage. Couldn't find it. Finally bought a new one. 10 years later, 10, 15 years later, I'm out doing yard work and I find it in like a pocket of an old grungy coat. I'm like, ah, and I found it. And like to me, it brought me back to the moment where my wedding and my marriage was healthy and I loved my wife and she loved me. So it was very nostalgic. But now I had two wedding bands. And oh, by the way, Uncle Robert had just lost his wedding band and she wanted me to send my spare one to him. So yes, I sent my wedding band to Uncle Robert because Paige wanted him to have one. And yes, the gasp on your face was about how I felt, but I didn't say anything. So she's expressed this desire to have, a child for him, maybe not with him. He's now wearing my wedding band because she wanted him to have it. And shortly after she left me, that would have been January of 2017, she and Uncle Robert traveled to Washington, D.C., because he would go try and spread the true gospel all over the world. And he would meet with supposedly, important people in D.C. And they went for Trump's first inauguration. And they spent about 2 weeks on the road going to and from D.C. And that was kind of like their honeymoon. I don't know, and I don't think anything inappropriate happened sexually, but it was kind of like that was figuratively her honeymoon of leaving me and now really being joined to, Uncle Robert and his quote unquote ministry, who, by the way, he was married. He's still married. He's been married for like 50 years. He's got a fairly normal looking wife. But that just kind of shows you how beholden to him she was, how controlled she was by this guy, Uncle Robert. So, and I was controlled as well. So I'm, all this is happening and I'm just a shell of a man. I doubted my every single thought and word that came out of my mouth or was in my mind. I doubted it. And because so there's no victory in Christ under a cult leader, right? The Bible talks about being victory in Christ. I had no victory. You're not allowed to have a victory. If you have victory, then you don't need him anymore. So I write this crazy letter that, expresses all the horrible things I've done in my life. And supposedly I always wanted to kill Uncle Robert and get him out of my life and just utter nonsense. And of course, then it was just for him. He shared it with Paige and her parents and my kids. They shared it with my kids as well. Years later, she filed for divorce when we were basically fighting over the kids. She brought that up at court, same letter. So, as it spiraled out of control in the spring of 2017, I reached out to my family and they immediately showered me with love and affection and help. And I was a wreck, absolute wreck. But it was through them, through friends and family, that the Lord strengthened me and then opened my eyes and ears to the fact that I was in a cult. And so when I tell people the Lord rescued me from a tiny but destructive religious cult, and I think oftentimes, it's not just like a light from heaven, like, on the road to Damascus. He uses people in our lives or uses circumstances. He used my family, my friends, and no one had any idea what was going on. They all knew about this crazy Uncle Robert, but all my family lived all over the country, in North Carolina or in California or Milwaukee, but not in Montana where I lived. And so I would tell them what was going on. I would share some emails I would get from Paige and Uncle Robert. And they're like, wait, he did what? He said what? So one of them was he called casinos the true churches in America. Like, I'm not kidding. He called casinos the true churches in America. And the churches that you and I would go to on a Sunday are absolutely worthless because they didn't know the true gospel. The idea is that you could go into a casino and regardless of your success in life or your bank account, whatever, the Lord could bless you. Okay, but I see people worshiping money in a casino. I don't see anybody worshiping the Lord in a casino. And so then they would call it his office. So we would go have our conferences in northern Idaho, where my in-laws lived, and there's a casino on the Indian reservation nearby. And I didn't like to gamble. I'm like, I've worked hard for this money. I don't have much of it. I don't want to throw it away. Casinos are big and beautiful, and they give you free drinks for a reason. The house always wins. And so they, at these conferences, would go to the office. And so my wife, my in-laws, and Uncle Robert, and then one of my wife's brothers who was in the cult, they would all go to the casino, and I would stay home and babysit the kids, put them to bed, and I'd go to sleep myself. And they would go to the office. And so a friend of mine, as I'm trying to describe all this, and I'm telling her about the office and how we would tithe to Uncle Robert. We all tithed to him. I used to tithe to other organizations and churches, and eventually all went to Uncle Robert. She's like, wait a minute. You guys sent him money every month, and he spent a lot of time at the casinos? And I'm like, boy, when you put it like that, it doesn't sound good, does it? Yep. And that was our little cult.
Oh my goodness. Again, so many similarities, right? Like
Yeah.
looking back now, we tithed, of course, that's a requirement, right? And the bigger your heart, it should be more
Yeah.
than 10%, right? Because
Right.
that's the bigger your heart is, the
Right.
more, the Lord will bless you, the more money, right? And
Right.
he's living in mansions and we're taking out second and third mortgages and getting, eviction notices,
Yeah.
right? While he's sitting in the mansions and
Right.
he's driving the fancy cars and he has cars that he doesn't even drive. They just sit in a warehouse, right? Like looking back, I'm like, how stupid
Right.
were all of these people? Like, couldn't you see, right? Like, but no, we looked at those blessings, right?
Right.
As because he is such a divine man of God
Right.
and has such a direct connection, the Lord just showers him with blessings.
Right.
Just shower. We
Yep.
didn't say because every dollar that we give is supporting his ludicrous ministry, right?
Right. Yeah. So, in addition to, casinos are the true churches in America, he also had a crazy idea. And oh, by the way, he went to casinos all the time. Every time I would send him a tithe check, and he didn't live opulently. So, who knows what he was doing with the money? He was probably losing at the casinos. He was always broke. He was always broke. So he didn't have fancy cars or a fancy home. He lived very modestly. And maybe he was giving some of his money away, but I think probably lost a lot of it at the casinos. And he wasn't getting rich off of us because we were not all wealthy people. There was only a few of us tithing to him. So, casinos are the true churches of America. They're his office. He also had this crazy idea called America's Sovereign National Credit. And I remember as a history lover of political science, I tried to research it. I couldn't find anything on it anywhere. Briefly, his idea was that if you're an American, you could basically write a check on yourself, the Bank of Martha, the Bank of Peter, because we as American have our sovereign national credit to where the money's already out there. We just need to tap into it, which of course is just crazy. Because like, let's say if we all could bank on the Bank of Peter and Bank of Martha, well, let's say there's a house down the street for sale. Well, it's $1 million. Well, I could pay back this money whenever I want. I'll write a check for 3 million. And Martha's like, well, I want the house more. I'll write a check for 5 million. You'd have inflation to devalue whatever dollar we're using within 24 hours and it would all collapse. But that just shows you the craziness of the thoughts he had. And so then he claimed that he had, personal relationships with congressmen, with senators, with former Fed Chairman Alan Greenspan. And all of it, again, kind of dovetailed to his wild theology, which was that, again, the Jews are out to control the whole world. They instituted the central bank. There may be some truth to that, but like really every Jew. And then, of course, then they're using the central bank to have dominion over the descendants of Jacob because Jacob stole the birthright from Esau. And the problem is like, as with what I just said, like you and I could also pick out of there, well, there's some truth, there's some truth, there's some truth. But now you put it into a stew and it stinks. It's no longer the truth, right? And that's the hard part because, like, he will share with you, well, yeah, the Federal Reserve is bad. Well, yeah, Jacob did steal the birthright from Esau, et cetera, et cetera. But then when he gives it his particular theology, it becomes really weird.
Again, I'm like, did they go to the same
Right.
cult man school?
Yeah,
Like,
it's the same school, right? Yeah. Same degree on the wall.
right. Like, is there a school for cult leaders? Because there's so many similarities. I'm like losing my mind here. Because yes, they would take a single truth from the Bible and twist it, manipulate it, add a little bit of their own, whatever, right? To make this concoction of absolute ludicrous when I look back, right? But it was what I believed because it's all I knew. I didn't have anything to compare it to. I wasn't going to other churches like you and your wife were. Like I had nothing to compare it to. My parents, on the other hand, they had been had grown up with some religion, but they hadn't had a personal relationship. So when
Mhm.
you don't have a personal relationship, you will fall more easily to something like this, right? And in the early 70s, which is around the same time you're talking about Uncle Robert came up, that's when our cult started as well. And it started from a place of there was a lot of traveling evangelical, small leaders that were talking and were communing and were kind of rising up during this movement, the hippie movement, right? My parents were hippies. My parents were looking for something bigger than themselves. They were looking to belong to something because they were both kind of floundering young adults, like, where do we belong in this big crazy world, right? We've just, burned our bras and we smoke a lot of pot and right, like there's just a lot of that there was no purpose really in the bigger purpose of humanity. And so when my parents heard this charismatic, like community, love, friendship, God, right? They're like, oh, this is what it means to be part of something bigger than ourselves, to give back, right? Like, and we're hippies. It fit into what they were experiencing in that early 70s time frame. And my guess is that it probably was similar for yours.
Yeah, well, the key word that I want to pick up on when you talk about is purpose, because we all want it. We all want that in our life. Of course, we have it as children of God. We have it as followers of Christ. We are Christians, but everybody wants it. I don't care if you're a Christian or you're atheist or whatever. We all want purpose.
Yep.
So when you feel like you have this special leader, in our case, Uncle Robert, you probably had the same feeling. You not only have purpose, but you have a purpose that is higher and better and unique compared to all your other neighbors because you get to sit at the foot.
You're chosen. You're
Yes, exactly.
chosen.
The Lord bless me. Wow, why do I deserve to be in the presence of this leader? Why am I so lucky that I get to hear directly from Uncle Robert or your leader, right? Well, here's the point too that I would make. I really feel like out of my book, there's three key principles, and one of them is that you have to stay in fellowship. You have to stay in fellowship, in connection with other Christian believers. If I cut off my thumb, Martha, I don't die. My thumb will die, right? It's got to stay connected to the body of believers. And
Yep.
when you get isolated, if you're that thumb that gets cut off, and we didn't again meet with other churches, then you are prey, you are susceptible to that cult leader, that false
Yep.
doctrine.
Yep.
So to me, that is one of the keys is that you have to stay in fellowship and community. And so there's really three keys that I talk about in my book. So again, I wrote my book. It's Stop the Tall Man, Save the Tiger, Amazon bestseller. The first one, an obvious one, would be a successful Christian marriage. Well, first of all, successful marriage has to be with Christ, but a successful Christian marriage,
Right.
you have Christ in the center. So no parent, no child, no priest, no pastor, no brother, no father, no father-in-law, no mother-in-law. Nobody should be in between the husband and wife. All of those people can help on the outside and should help try and
Right.
strengthen the marriage. On the
Right.
outside, in between the husband and wife, only God.
Yep.
We had Uncle Robert. So as long
Yep.
as he had that position in her life, my marriage was doomed. Number two would be what I just talked about. You have to stay in fellowship and communication with the body of Christ. The thumb can't breathe and pump blood on its own. It needs the heart, it needs the lungs, it needs the eyes.
Yep.
Right? And then number three is a really key one. I think this one I'm curious to see your reaction to it. In my case, we talked about in our previous session about raising the bar, in other words, to be saved, which in order to be saved, and I do believe that in predestination, election, and choosing, the Bible's very clear,
Yep.
right? He chose us, right? If I
Yep.
could choose him, I wouldn't need a savior. And I'm
Right.
thankful he chose me. Okay, so um, salvation comes first. and then sanctification, right? You're born, and then when you're born, you learn to walk, to read, to sleep, et cetera, as a child, right? Same thing in our faith journey. Salvation and then sanctification. If anyone tries to switch the order to where you have to be sanctified or learn certain things first, do certain things first before you are ready to be
Right.
saved, that person is acting as a gatekeeper to God. It's unbiblical and it is wicked. And that's what Uncle Robert did.
So I've never heard it put in such layman terms because people ask me all the time, like if I'm concerned about whether I'm joining a cult or not, like how would I know?
Oh boy. Right. If you have that question, that's probably a red flag.
And so, but the way that you just answered that is very much like how we could answer that, right? Like, how do you know it's a cult? First of all, we discussed this in the previous episode as well. When you're in a cult, you are not thinking, "Oh, is this a cult?" That's not generally going to be the reason why you get out of the situation. You get out of it for an external reason or an internal reason, not because you suddenly understand this might be a cult. There are occasions though where you start doubting, and that's what I want to ask you about is because I did when I was within the cult, there were times where I started doubting and I was like, can this could this really be not true? But then so quickly he would pick up on it. Cultman would pick up on it and he would prey on your distrust. He would prey on your disloyalty to God. He would, right? And so quickly that doubt would be like, "Oh, I'm such a sinner. I'm so bad. Like God, forgive me," right? And I can see that you're resonating deeply. So I'm gonna hand it back over to you.
Sure. I've experienced everything you're just talking about. And, I guess I don't really like the term gaslighting, but I guess that's really the definition of it. You would have
Yes.
doubts. What this person is saying doesn't ring true. There's a problem with this. And you never would get an answer. It would always be, Martha, why don't you just believe? Why do you keep doubting? Peter, why don't you get it? Why are you so stupid that you don't get it? And the short answer, again, if I can go to layman's terms, which I think will really help people, the truth doesn't mind being questioned. The
Yes.
the truth
Yes. I
wants
want to scream
questions.
that from the rooftop. Yes.
Right. The truth doesn't mind questions, it welcomes questions. Cult leaders hate
Hate questions.
questions. They don't want to be questioned. Shut
Yep.
up and obey.
Yep.
Shut up and listen. The Bible, like I'm not a great orator. I think I know my Bible pretty well. And I could go and debate anybody. And I might say, you know what, I don't have the answer to that. But okay, I'll try and learn it and I'll try and mature and grow in my faith. But you can ask me anything. A Muslim, a Buddhist, an atheist, you can ask me anything because I have nothing to hide because I know I have the truth behind me. Cult leaders hate being questioned. So, to the person that might be having those doubts, which is great, that means they're not brainwashed yet. If you're brainwashed, you don't have doubts. Okay. So that means they haven't been fully brainwashed yet. But if they have questions, you'll find it really quick if you're in a cult. You go ask that cult leader or someone in authority. And if you don't get an answer, like a true answer, um, there is your answer. That
Yes.
is
Yes.
inappropriate. I'm not saying it's a cult. I'm saying if they don't want a question, they don't have the truth to share with you.
Yep.
They're hiding something.
They're hiding something. Absolutely. That, yes. Yes. It's so simple, right? If you go back to just that one thing, because every single cult is going to tell you you have to have a blind faith. You just
Right.
have to walk and do as we say because we are the direct connection from God. This is what you're given, what you're told, what you have to believe, right? And if you question, it's a lack of your heart. It's a
Right.
lack of your belief, right? It's a lack of your faith. And so, question, yes, questioning is so
Right.
important. And if they're not willing to be questioned, you might be in a cult.
Yeah.
Before we wrap up, I want to ask you one more question because it's a question that I get so often, and I just want to know what your experience was. So, since you weren't born into it and you actually married into it, and the conversion was a little bit slower than it was for me being born into it, right? How did your family on the outside looking in, seeing those small changes and going, this Uncle Robert guy, right? Because growing up, I didn't have relations with my extended family because we weren't allowed to. And then when I escaped and I got out and I started forming these relationships as an adult, I was 26. There, I heard stories of how they tried to come see us and how they were taken away from us and pushed away by my parents and all of these things, and how devastated they were because they didn't get to have relationships with us, right? Like I thought we were taught they didn't care. We were taught they were evil, right? So I see you acknowledging. So I'm just curious as to what your experience was and what your experience with your children are now.
Sure. So it sounds like my experience was nowhere near as severe as yours in comparison to the shunning of family members. My extended family, so my parents, my four brothers and their wives, and all my nieces and nephews, they were not a part of the cult. They knew very little about it, but I could still have a relationship with them. We would go see them with, my wife and my family. We'd go to Christmas or in the summer for a family vacation. So we would still see people. We didn't talk about Uncle Robert, and my brothers and parents didn't dare bring it up. So after the fact, when I got out of it, they would tell me stories of, yeah, Peter, we kind of knew was weird, but we didn't dare say anything because we knew that, Paige, your wife, would get quite angry, right? We didn't want to then lose you guys because we felt like if we brought up Uncle Robert too much or shared concerns, then you guys would really withdraw. It was on Paige's side of the family. She was one of five. Three of her siblings were cut off. So her parents and Paige and their nieces and nephews, they've never met. And for Paige's parents, their grandchildren, they've never met. I remember when I reconnected with my three youngest children. So again, I have five children. When Paige left me, she took the three youngest with her to Northern Idaho. The courts got involved. They saw how bad it was. We got a garden ad litem involved. She wrote a jaw-dropping 50-page report. The courts sent the three youngest kids back to me, and they lived with me for about 6 years. And their mother, Paige, had supervised visits for 6 years. That's how bad it was. And they saw how bad it was. The worst parental alienation they'd ever seen, and then cult involvement. And I remember meeting with my kids before they were, they had come to live with me. I show them, I don't want anybody to see them, I show them like, hey, do you know who this is? And it was a picture of my niece who I had just met. I never knew she existed. It was Paige's younger sister. She got kicked out of the call, well, not kicked out of the call, but she was vilified 20 years earlier. And she had three kids. And so I show my little daughters and son, hey, do you know who this little girl is? I'm like, no. I said, that's your cousin. Eyes get really wide. And so there was, I think, five or six cousins they didn't even know existed. So now when they came back to live with me, they've been introduced to these people. So there was severe shunning on her side, but again, not on my side of the family. Then, when I recovered, I would hear the stories. Well, we kind of knew Peter. Well, we had to be careful what we said, Peter. That kind of thing. Of how now I always tell people that parenting is a marathon, not a sprint. So the court's intervention, which I never wanted the courts involved with my family. I'm a libertarian. I just don't want the government to bother me at all. But I do believe they got it right in my case. They truly helped me help rescue my kids from that tiny little cult. And their mother loves them. I mean, she means well. She's just brainwashed. And the kids still love their mom. But I do believe that it was good for them to get out of it. So they live with me, and the two youngest still live with me. With the older ones, it's a work in progress. It's been very difficult. There is some thawing of the relationship. I was told you're a devil with no soul by one of my children. You're just a sperm donor bloodline, and it was just like a computer virus from Uncle Robert to Paige to my
Yep.
kids. You could
Yep.
literally just follow it, and that is emotional abuse of
Yep.
children when you do that. So it's I love being a dad, and I'll always be their father, no matter what they think of me. But I do pray for them. And so I do hope that, the older ones will come around and we'll have a relationship again one day. One day.
One day. That's the key word. Thank you so much for sharing so vulnerably, so openly. I know that you are on a mission not only to share your story, your testimony, but to wake people up and to give information and to testify, not for your own experience, but to help others. I'm assuming that's part of your purpose and vision now. In the last
Yep.
3 minutes or so, can you tell us what you're doing with this now? Because we heal in order to evolve, in order to serve. So my guess is that you are looking to serve in some way.
Sure. I think to the story in Luke chapter, it's either 8 or 9, where Jesus heals the man that had the legion of demons in him. The demons leave and go into the pigs. And then the rest of the story is fascinating. The man is healed, he's in his right mind, and he begs Christ to go with him. And you remember what Christ says? He says, no, go home and tell everyone what the Lord has done for you. That's your testimony. So what the Lord has done for me is he's rescued me from a tiny but destructive religious cult. So some people are like, well, Peter, just move on, get over it. Do you think that man who had the demons got over it? He did, but he also continued for probably the rest of his life to tell people, this is what the Lord has done for me. So that's why I wrote my book, Stop the Tall Man, Save the Tiger. You can learn more about me on my website, authorpeteryoung.com. I speak publicly and I write and I go on podcasts like this and I share my story not to air my dirty laundry. I never wanted to do this, but I've gone through it just like you have, Martha. We've experienced the pain. It was horrific. It was gut-wrenching, but it's over. Well, why not use all of that? Why not use the fuel of that to then help others? Because you know what? The journey in and out of a cult is not something you want to experience. And so if I can prevent people from having to go through that, yeah, I'm going to keep doing this because I never really thought, being like an expert on cults would be my calling, but it kind of has turned into that. It is my calling. And so I'm happy to share my story because I don't believe my story is tragic. I mean, part of it is, but I'm not tragic now. I'm victorious. I don't look to a guru or to a wife I'm scared of. I go straight to the Lord. James chapter 1, Lord, please give me wisdom. And oh, by the way, don't doubt. When you ask, he'll give it to you, but don't doubt. And I don't. And he has given me wisdom. So that's what I share.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much, Peter, for coming on my show. Thank you for sharing your heart. Thank you for sharing your mission, your vision. I end every episode in the same way. And that is, the show is called Let Glory Shine. So I want to ask you, Peter, what does it mean for you to allow your glory to shine?
Oh my gosh. It's not my glory, right? It's just like the moon has no light, but it reflects the sun. And so I and you, we are reflections of the sun. And so if I have any glory to shine, it's what the Lord has done for me in my life. And it's really so simple, right? Because it's not me, it's what the Lord has done for me. And I'm just thankful. So I share that with others.
I love that. Thank you so much, Peter, for coming on again. And thank you for joining yet another episode of Let Glory Shine. I will be back next week, same time, same station. Good night, and let your glory shine.
Let glory shine from the ashes I rise. Every scar a story, every tear baptized. This is my freedom. This is my climb. Let glory shine. It's the power inside. This is your prosperity. Like rivers, you've stepped into your place. Rise, reign, and remember, you were born to shine. Welcome to your moment, Prospera, it's time.
We hope you enjoyed today's show on Prospera TV Network. Make it a point to visit us on YouTube and catch all your favorite shows, anytime you want. Interested in hosting a show of your own? Or advertising your business on our network? Contact Elena Rodriguez.